Okay, it's going to take a minute for me to get it. They are a biocompatible dye marker, an elastomer, that can be used to mark animals. Before this technique and other techniques like this were developed, they would mark frogs by cutting off one or more toes. So like someone could just be missing a pinky or a pinky and a thumb, and you can make a bunch of different combinations like that. But it's very important to me ethically that I don't mutilate an animal. Since I've been finding these animals time and time again, I'm doing it right. I'm doing it safely. That should be enough, yeah. Right on. I'm Ian Biazzo. I'm a PhD student, well, PhD candidate now at University of Central Florida in the Conservation Biology department. I study the effects of prescribed fire on frog populations here in Central Florida. Today we're going to focus on tree frogs. Since this is Florida and it's a sandy limestone ground underneath, it starts to cave in just a tiny bit over time and creates a dish. And that dish fills up with water during the rainy season. But then usually it drains out or evaporates in the dry season, and it's called a seasonal or ephemeral marsh. In Florida, we call them depression marshes. The tree frogs go into the pipes on their own as like a passive trap, but they can come and go whenever they want. They just like it there.
Can I take a look?
Yeah. Can you see them down there?
Oh, they're so cute.
These are actually really small ones. They might be too small to mark. Frogs, we all know frogs live in water, but what most people don't realize is that many species, including tree frogs, spend upwards of 90–95% of their life away from the water. If a fire comes through, where does the frog go? What happens? So there's three main hypotheses. Does the frog die? Does it hide in place somewhere? Or does it run away to a completely different habitat? And using the mark recapture method I have, where you mark them and come back later and hope for recaptures, I can actually start to model which one of those is the prevailing dynamic in this system. Sometimes the smaller ones stick more, but they usually hop right out. Except for these guys. I process them in the bag so that I don't hurt them with my hands, and also it's easier to prevent them from hopping away. He's going to be just big enough. He's going to be 18. The way I do it is left thigh, left calf, right calf, looking at the ventral side.
So the ink is going in him or around him?
So you know how we have multiple layers of skin?
Mm-hmm.
It goes kind of as close to the top layer as possible. So it is inside him, but it's not like deep inside him. It's supposed to be right at the skin layer, right underneath the skin layer. Again, it's a little hard to see on these tiny guys, but right now he has 4 markers: orange, black, blue, black. One thing you'll see is none of them look exactly the same because they all have unique patterns and they all change colors. I read it as G, R, K, G. Green, red, black, green. It's funny because a lot of scientists frown on like naming your study species. They're like, don't give cute names to your animals. And I'm like, I don't. They just come out like that with the codes. Like this one we just marked, B-O-B-K, Bob K. This frog will forever be Bob K. Good day, Bob. Okay. Growing up as a person who loves animals and nature, conservation is always in the conversation. I think when I was like 4 or 5 years old, we moved from an urban place to a suburban place. So we had a little bit of yard, and I probably saw my first earthworm and my first spider. To be honest, I freaked out. It definitely scared me. And my mom picked up the spider and picked up the earthworm and showed me that it was okay. And that really started to pique my interest. So I think my mom and my grandfather got me field guides that year or very close to that year. And I still have those 2 field books to this day. And it's cool because now I might be helping to contribute to some of the knowledge that's been lacking for some of the species. Like this is the species I work with most, the pinewoods tree frog. So one thing they always have is this mask. They always have this mask that kind of runs through their eyes. And on top of their head, so because they can change colors, sometimes they have spots and sometimes they don't. But if they do have spots, they always have this triangle shape connecting their eyes. And he's a recapture, so that's cool. Based on his color code, I would guess this was months ago, like maybe even almost a year ago. Which means this frog has been a part of the study for that long. He has come back and survived that entire time. In my head, I always just assume, these animals have evolved with fire for hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of years. They're fine. But then I saw a frog, literally, as I was on a fire. It was one of these tree frogs, Hyla ephemeralis, the pinewoods tree frog, and he was hopping out of the fire. And I was like, okay, well that makes sense. They gotta either hide, run away, or they're gonna die. And he hopped, like if the flame was on the ground, he climbed up and hopped off the top of the plant. But he hopped right into a pile of ash. And, if you're a deer or a bird and you walk through ash, you're gonna be fine. But if you're a frog, you're kind of like a sponge with legs, and you're just gonna soak up and get dried out. And that's what happened. This frog hit the ash, got like another half hop, and all of a sudden was like incapacitated, like he was like drunk. So I had to pick him up, rinse him off, put him on a tree, and after a while he hopped away. So it got me thinking, that's interesting. 22. Another spider here. Look at this guy. Hi. We need to stop seeing nature as a commodity that we can go visit when we want to, and start realizing it's something we need to recognize as part of our lives, and a necessary part of our lives. The greatest threats facing wildlife in Florida, as I understand it, number one is just got to be development. With development, you get habitat loss and you get habitat fragmentation, where you may keep the big preserve, but you build a road straight through the middle of it. And that road, although it may only take up a certain tiny percentage of the area you just cut in half, the fact is you did just cut it in half. And that fragmentation has profound effects on wildlife, because animals move. It's almost as if people don't care. It's just, we need more people here, we need to build more, and forget about everything else. And wow, that's a problem. This is what Florida used to look like, more or less, pre-human development, and it was never a closed canopy, at least the majority of it. It was these open pine flatwoods or pine grasslands. So if you look out there, almost every tree out there, with the exception of a few, are pine trees. This species, the longleaf pine, has evolved with fire, and part of that adaptation is to keep that part of the tree high above where the fire should go. And it works. This is that part I was talking about. The fire scorched all the way up to here, probably even a little higher, and then this started to regrow. But if you look at the top, that white bud at the top is perfectly healthy, and that's the part that needs to stay alive during a fire. So it's protected by this. The fire comes up, it burns all this, and it goes away, but it protects that really important meristem. I also want to have a bigger impact on people. So, to be honest, that's kind of a career adjustment that I'm still exploring. I work with the Office of Undergraduate Research at UCF, and I'm the graduate assistant for a program called TRIP, which stands for the Transfer Student Research and Integration Program. We take transfer students and we help them get into research programs here at UCF. And my role as the GA is to kind of be a mentor. And I meet with them on about a monthly basis to help them navigate what it means to become a young researcher in the life sciences. And it's a really great part of my job because I love working with them and helping them get to their next step in their career. But I can only imagine having to take classes, and in the middle of your classes having to shift to an online mode. And for some students that is really difficult. And I hope that's one thing I've been able to do is support them through that transition and through the entire quarantine situation, really. I was in Orlando for sure when COVID started getting more well-known and becoming a wider spread and acknowledged problem. I was sampling pretty consistently about once a month. At some point, the preserve was shut down for safety issues, and I couldn't collect for about 3 months. So there was a gap of 3 months where I have no data. It's a bummer, but it's not the end of the world. It would have been great to have it just because number one, that's the fire season, and number two, that's the breeding season. But really, other than that, I've been very fortunate, and I'm grateful for that. "28, alive, empty." Well, that's a good question. How to identify myself as a researcher in a STEM field kind of thing? That's a question I think more people should be asked, honestly. And my short answer is I identify as a white man. And the reason why I think it's important to really emphasize that is because there is a certain amount of privilege that comes with that, especially in a STEM field. So a privilege in that way is obviously there's a tremendous sex bias where a woman could say the same thing, but if I say it, it has more merit inherently, which is wrong. But it does happen. You know, it goes even deeper than that. If you read any of the literature from 20, 30 years ago, it was a boys' club. It was a joke, honestly. There was good science, but it was just a bunch of white guys writing letters to each other and publishing responses to each other. And I envision a future of STEM where there is way more diversity across the entire spectrum of diversity in our faculty and in our researchers and our grad students. Because right now it is just not reflective of that. I didn't necessarily understand some of the struggles people went through. Whether it was men, women, people of color, people in the LGBTQ community. And it was later into my adult life where I started to hear people more and understand them and recognize that, wow, there are problems. There really are. And even if I don't contribute to it directly, I still belong to a system that has those hierarchies in place. So it's extremely important for me to acknowledge them. You can't dismantle something if you don't know it's there. 2020 has thrown that into the spotlight. I have been shocked at how much opposition there is to just supporting other people. I didn't realize how systemic and how widespread the hate or the difference is. Indifference maybe is a good way to put that. People just, it doesn't affect them, so they don't care. Change is coming. Change has started. and it's about time, really. It really is. What you saw today with the pipes on the trees looking at tree frogs, even though we only saw one species today, I'm going to continue that for another full year. It all started with an observation. I had a question brewing in the back of my mind about fire and amphibians, and then I saw this observation of, whoa, that frog just got messed up. It is my job to come out here and trudge through the swamp and the marsh and catch these frogs and study other aspects of the ecosystem. And that is, I'm so lucky and I'm so grateful for that. So I come out here because there's interesting questions and because it's my passion. I don't see Vince. Oh, there he is. We're almost there.